US President Donald Trump is threatening to take over or destroy Iran's main oil export hub at Kharg Island. Trump admits it may require ground troops. But given the nature of this conflict, will he take that chance? And why does Kharg Island matter so much? This is Inside Story. Hello again, I'm James Bays. It's Iran's main oil hub with nearly all of the country's exports depending on this area. Kharg Island is now facing an ultimatum from US President Donald Trump, who's threatened to take it by force, likely by putting boots on the ground, or to destroy the island altogether if Tehran doesn't agree to a deal soon. So as the war enters its second month, what would controlling Kharg Island mean for the conflict? And would Trump follow up on his threats? In a moment, our guests join us to discuss the likely fallout from seizing this vital island. But first, Imogen Kimber has this report.
Kharg Island is Iran's main oil exporting hub, handling 90% of the country's crude export. It sits off the southern coast of Iran at the northern end of the Gulf. The US is threatening to either send troops to take control of it or completely obliterate it. It's not the first time the US made this threat. On the 22nd of March, President Donald Trump said Iran had 48 hours to open the Strait of Hormuz, or the US would target its energy facilities. This was extended to end on the 6th of April.
It'll be up to Iran to decide, and if they choose to try to block the straits, then they will have to face real consequences, not just from the United States, but from regional countries and from the world.
Meanwhile, the US insists it's been holding indirect talks with Iran. But Iran says diplomacy is a cover for a US plan to put troops on the ground. There are US aircraft carriers, ships, and around 5,000 US Marines and 2,000 paratroopers heading towards Iran. To send US Marines to Kharg Island, the journey has to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, the very seaway that Iran says is only open to what it considers friendly countries, while others face the risk of attacks. Kharg Island is thought to be similarly well defended. Iran's Speaker of Parliament, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, posted on X threatening a strong response if such an attack took place. The US has already hit Kharg Island, targeting military sites but avoiding its energy facilities. In response, Iran increased its attacks on energy sites in the region, like Qatar's Ras Laffan liquefied gas hub. Some think the threats against Kharg Island are leverage to force Tehran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Some think Kharg Island may be a distraction, and there are other islands like Keshin, Tunib and Larak that are important to Iran and may be attacked. Either way, Iran makes it clear it will defend itself.
Any kind of decision-making about the end of the war will be only in the framework of securing dignity, security and interests of the great nation of Iran.
So the region and the world wait to see what comes next in this dangerous conflict. Imogen Kimber, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Well, let's discuss the issues with our guests who are joining us on today's Inside Story. And joining me in the studio, Negar Mortazavi. She's a senior non-resident fellow at the Center for International Policy. In Sarasota, Florida, Matthew Kroenig is vice president at the Atlantic Council. And in Geneva, Alexandre Vautravers, he is defense policy specialist and editor-in-chief of the Swiss Military Review. Let me start with you, Negar. Kharg Island. Where is it and why do you think it is now so important? It's probably always been very important for Iran.
I'm so glad you asked that. It's an island off the coast of Iran. And I think this war is very much about geography. So I encourage everyone who hasn't looked at a map of Iran and the region to take a look at one of the largest countries in the region, one of the most populated, we're talking about 90-something million people, and this island, which is right off the coast, where Iran has strategic geographic advantage over. It's one of the key locations for energy for Iran. And this talk of potentially attacking it or invading it or destroying it is going to have very serious consequences for not just energy consumption and production in Iran, but also potentially the global market prices. So this is going to be a problem added to an already global, regional, and global problem. So I think it's something the Iranians are taking very seriously when they hear the rhetoric from the White House, the president, and others. And I'm also very curious to know how this operation is going to unfold. This is going to put U.S. troops and service members in direct shooting range and harm's way from Iran, something the Iranians haven't really had in this war. They haven't been able to inflict a lot of pain on the U.S. side directly. The casualty from their viewpoint on the U.S. side is actually not high. And so this is something they've said publicly that they're welcoming. And so it's a big question whether this is something that President Trump wants to do as far as an escalation, both on the energy front and also as far as putting the troops in harm's way.
Alexandre, you often have in war the fog of war, but in this war, a lot of the fog of war is coming from the man directing things, from the President of the United States. With regard to Kharg Island, in recent hours, he told the Financial Times in an interview, to be honest with you, my favourite thing is to take the oil in Iran. Maybe we take Kharg Island. And then he went on his Truth Social and said that, yes, there were good negotiations going on, but if they didn't become good, he was going to completely obliterate all of their electricity generating plants, oil wells, and Kharg Island. So the president completely contradicting himself. We don't actually know what he's even threatening.
I think, on the contrary, we are in something which is quite known. The rhetoric of the President of the United States, if you compare what is happening today and what has happened a couple of months ago in Venezuela, is very, very similar. First of all, he tries to shift the attention from place A to point B to point C. Number two, he tries and he eventually is quite successful in keeping for himself all options open. In other terms, it is very difficult in this fog of war, as you have perfectly described. It is very difficult to put together any kind of a defense because nobody knows what the real objective is.
Matthew, what do you think could be a military objective for these two things, taking out the energy facilities or actually seizing the island? One, and you heard Alexandre mention it could be like Venezuela, that the US actually wants the oil. But what other military objectives do you see in what he is threatening with these two contradictory threats?
Yes, with regard to the military objectives, I think that President Trump and the Trump administration believe they have succeeded in their main objective of degrading Iran's nuclear missile capabilities, degrading the Navy, and so on. But now they have a dilemma because Iran is left in control of the Strait of Hormuz. And so one possibility would be for Trump just to declare victory and go home with Iran in control of the Strait. But that's not desirable for a number of reasons. So other possibilities would be, one, to go and seize Kharg Island, and the United States could do that militarily with ground forces and control Iranian oil exports. That's kind of the Venezuela model your other guest was referring to. Another possibility would be to simply destroy the terminals and other energy infrastructure, to try to coerce Iran into opening the Strait of Hormuz. But that would be undesirable for other reasons, including further increasing energy prices and the risk to the global economy. So hard to know what President Trump will do. He does like to keep his options open. If I were betting, though, I would bet that actually he declares victory. With Iran in control of the Strait. I think we know that he is uncomfortable with long, drawn-out military campaigns, especially those that require boots on the ground.
Negar, one of those things that were mentioned there by Matthew as a possible aim for doing this is to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. But of course, it's worth reminding everyone that at the start of the war, it wasn't even closed. What they're trying to fix is a problem they've created.
Exactly. I mean, talk about digging in and creating new problems. The Strait of Hormuz, most of the world hadn't even heard of that a month ago. Apparently, the president got briefings. He didn't even believe that this is something the Iranians would do, even though they had threatened. Every step that Iran has escalated, by the way, is something they had threatened, they had telegraphed. And let's not forget, it's not just the Strait of Hormuz. They're opening new fronts. There could be potentially another strait. The Houthis are entering this war, and they have control, strategic advantage over Bab el-Mandab. So Iran's grip on the world energy right now is about 20%. This can increase. And so I agree with Matthew, actually. There are three questions, if I can just throw in three W's in here. Why, what, and when? Why did this war start? Was it the nuclear program? Wasn't that obliterated last year in the June? That declaration of the obliteration of the program is still on the White House website. And by the way, it says whoever says otherwise is fake news. Is it the military? Is it the Navy? Is it their drones? Is it their missiles? They're still shooting. There doesn't seem to be an end to that. What is it? What? Is this a military incursion? Is this a limited operation? Is this another big war in the Middle East? The goals, the why, and the what are connected. And then when? When is this going to wrap? Was it going to be a matter of days? At the beginning, it sounded like it could be days and then weeks. Now it's already a month. Is this going to be the next endless war in the Middle East? If you commit troops on the ground, the Iranians start killing a whole bunch of Americans, can you just exit then? Or do you need to continue? You take Kharg, then you need to open Hormuz, then Bab el-Mandab. So I feel like the more the U.S. goes in without these clear goals and objectives, and it also depends on who you listen to. Is it the president? Is it the Secretary of War? Is it the Secretary of State? Is it the Vice President? They all have different rhetoric and different reasonings. So again, agreeing with Matthew, I think it's still not too late for the president to call it a victory. He has achieved a lot. But the Iranians have also put up a pretty good fight. They have a lot of cards that they've played. Yes, they're the underdog, but this is an asymmetric war, and they're defending their homeland. This is their turf. This is their neighborhood. They're not going to give it up. And with ground invasions or any kind of committing troops on the ground, it's just going to get worse and worse. And call it a victory. And the president is actually excellent at messaging to his base. He can say he won. He can mention all the victories and all the achievements, and end this war that is now not only regional, but it has global implications. And it seems to be unpopular everywhere in the world, including in the United States.
So let me take that back to Matthew, the three W's you heard there and the scenario that Negar has painted of the situation. All of them, she says, show that he should end it now. Would you not agree he should end it now because it's going badly? Would you agree the war is going badly?
I don't think so. I think overall it's a success. Iran has been one of the greatest threats to U.S. and regional security for decades. And intelligence analysts assess threats by looking at intent and capability. And so the Islamic Republic has had hostile intent toward the United States for decades. And it's also had capability, a nuclear program, a missile program, a navy, these terror and proxy groups. And now that capability is gone. So the threat has been significantly set back for years, maybe even a decade to come. I think we will be in a better place when the conflict ends. The only challenge is that Iran does have these asymmetric options. It's holding the global economy hostage right now. And so the question
you said that's
is
the only thing, Matthew. That's a rather big thing, is it not, Negar?
Yeah, and just to add, my point is moving ahead will make things worse. So at this point, I feel like this is the point where the president can call it a victory, and instead of making things worse and give the Iranians the opportunity to start new fires. There's a front in Lebanon, in Iraq, the Houthis. They still have more cards to play, and they're in it for the long game. They're trying to turn this into a war of attrition, and I feel like that's the place where the U.S. actually would be in a weaker spot. They can inflict a lot of pain at an initial attack because the U.S. is escalating vertically and the Iranians are escalating horizontally. So the more this goes, I think the deeper the U.S. is going to get and the newer problems will be created.
Alexandre, in terms of Kharg Island, coming back to that, one of the interesting things is that, yes, the Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed to most vessels, but certainly one oil exporter is doing very well. Iran. Iran is now earning twice as much from oil sales now than it did at the beginning of the war.
I think it's very relative, and to build on what you said, and also the discussion earlier as to why is all of this happening. I think that we need to distinguish between the short-term goals, and definitely many of these short-term military objectives, political objectives, have been reached. Medium term, we're talking about regime change. We're talking about a reshuffling of the power relationships in the region. This is where there is definitely more work to do. And then there is also a long-term game. And the long-term game is really aiming this operation against China. All of the oil export from Iran is not being channeled through Kharg Island. It is only the one that is exported by sea. Which used to be sold 1/3 of its market value, and most of this was purchased on the cheap by China. So you mentioned before the possible destruction of these facilities, which would durably weaken Iran's economy for the decades to come, because this will not be rebuilt, repaired in a matter of days or weeks, then definitely the long-term game, the long-term strategy of the United States is to durably push back China in the Middle East.
Matthew, certainly Trump is not telling us what he's going to do, and he's certainly keeping a military option open because of the forces that are now heading there and the sort of forces you would need to seize either Kharg Island or some of the other islands. Tell us a little bit more about the firepower that is heading and is already in the region, and exactly how you would use that if you were going to take Kharg Island.
Yes. Well, the United States has already assembled a large, probably the largest military force in the region since the invasion of Iraq 20 years ago. And so the two military options, if this were just about striking energy infrastructure, the United States has the capability to do that. It would be some of the same capabilities we've seen going after missile and drone production facilities. Actually, seizing the island is much more complicated. That would require an amphibious landing on the island, putting Marines there in large enough numbers to hold the island. And actually taking the island wouldn't be the difficult part. The difficult part would be holding the island in the face of hostile Iranian actions. So we know that Iran has the coast lined with drones and missiles, so they could attack U.S. forces on the island that way. If you look at a map, it's very close to Iran's coastline. The U.S. military has been trying to bomb that coastline and degrade Iran's missile and drone capability, but it hasn't yet succeeded in eliminating everything. And so those U.S. forces on Kharg Island would be vulnerable.
Alexandre, what do you think about the challenges of doing this? If they decided, there are various options that they could do in terms of ground that they could take, islands that they could take. But if they were to take Kharg Island, it's almost 500 kilometres beyond the Strait of Hormuz. As Negar said at the beginning, one needs to look at a map here. They've got to go through this very, very narrow strait. How challenging would that be?
Okay, getting in is not the main problem. I would say that there are really two options. One is seizing this infrastructure, and then, as we heard before, the real problem is not going to be the entry part of the military operation. It's going to be holding this against repeated attacks over days, over weeks, and potentially over months. And this would then follow up into a kind of attrition warfare where the escalation is always possible because you want to silence, you want to destroy or degrade the capabilities of firing upon that island. Well, you're going to little by little find yourself engulfed into a protracted conflict. The other possibility would be denial, and definitely in the past 4 or 5 years, we have seen a lot of this doctrine being newly written for the US Marine Corps. This is called littoral warfare, and it involves small units, extremely mobile units, using a lot of drones, a lot of robots, and a lot of standoff firepower. And with this, it could be unimaginable to not only secure this particular island, but a beachhead over several hundreds of kilometers in which the important is not to hold the infrastructure or exploit this infrastructure, but really deny the Iranians the possibility of getting anywhere near those infrastructures.
Negar, if this happened, it would be crossing a line, not just an invasion, further illegality under international law, but it would mean there were ground troops on Iranian soil. One assumes that has an effect in the United States, but also in Iran, what people in Iran would think. Do you think that would be a moment for Iranians and those that are running things in Iran to lose morale, or would it be a moment that they'd be galvanized?
This would be a unifying moment, because we've seen even throughout the course of this war that the war has served as a rally around the flag issue, particularly, of course, for the base of the Islamic Republic. They're out on the street rallying. They were out on the street with an outpouring of grief after the assassination of top leaders, etc. So that base has grown over the course in power, in presence, in their resolve. And the opposition, which also is pretty strong in the country, and part of that, I would say a minority, was thinking, I'm so fed up with this status quo that I just wanted to end with any circumstances, come and finish the job. And we're seeing a change in that thinking. People are starting to realize that, okay, there isn't a surgical way of ending things. There isn't a clean way, a strategic way, or as they call it, only attacking specific, military or regime or nuclear sites. This is very much a war on Iran, a war on Iranians. And I've seen that mentality of people who thought maybe freedom bombs would actually bring freedom, to now realize that the war started by attacking an elementary school, 170 kids killed, hospitals, universities, water, oil, gas, so many civilian targets, either as the main target or as collateral, has been destroyed. And civilians have been paying a very high price in Iran. So I would say invading or attacking the actual soil in the homeland would serve even more as a rallying and unifying cause. And that nationalistic feeling, yes, whatever their internal domestic problems, a lot of Iranians, this happened in the 1980s during the Iran-Iraq war when Saddam Hussein invaded Iran. You would see and hear stories of opposition to the Islamic Republic who would say, okay, we'll put that on hold. I want to go sign up and go to the front line and defend the homeland, because this is no longer about the Islamic Republic. This is about Iran. This is about sovereignty. This is about the nation state. And I think it would talk about alienating a fairly pro-Western, pro-American part of the Iranian population.
Matthew, crossing a line for Iranians, crossing a line for people there in the US too, including some of Trump's base. He'd be doing, by putting troops on Iranian soil, he'd be doing the sort of things he promised not to do on the campaign trail?
Well, just 2 points. First, I'd strongly disagree with Negar's assessment there. The United States has scrupulously followed the law of armed conflict, only targeting legitimate military sites. We're still waiting for an investigation on what happened to the girls' school. But if that was indeed a U.S. strike, that was an accident, not intentional. On the other hand,
Matthew, you can continue in a moment, but the whole war is illegal, is it not? I mean, under international law, it's illegal.
No, it is legal. Iran posed a threat to the United States, and the United States worked to address that threat. So it's a legal war, and the U.S. targeting is legal. And Iran is the one intentionally holding hostage the global economy, intentionally targeting civilian targets. So there is a good actor here and a bad actor here. The Islamic Republic of Iran is evil. On the president's base, they'll support anything he does. Latest polls I've seen show that 94% of MAGA Republicans support the president's war effort. That said, I do think he's going to be reluctant to introduce ground forces.
So, Alexandre, in terms, if this were to happen, and we really don't know with this president which way he's going to go, but he certainly has the military tools to do it. You said holding this island or any other island he took would be the challenge. Could it turn into a quagmire?
Okay, my sincere hope is that it will not go in this direction, of course. And as I mentioned before, I think there are technical ways, there are tactical opportunities and solutions for this not to be necessary. Because what the United States wants really is to be able to negotiate with a very strong hand with whoever is in power in Tehran over the next few years. This is very much what is also happening today in Venezuela. Unfortunately, where I think there is a risk for this American adventure in the Middle East is the fact that there was really a window of opportunity among the local population in Iran. There was massive information operation. This was very successful to turn the public opinion in favor of these strikes and in favor of regime change. And I think, unfortunately, time has spent, information has been very contradictory, and now I think a military operation or the continuation of this operation, the extension of this military operation with troops on the ground, all of this is not going to be successful in turning the population. On the contrary.
Alexandre, let me get Negar in there. Alexandre suggesting there that this is, he hopes, pressure in order to help diplomacy. Is that how you see it?
I mean, just to add a point here, the school was attacked twice, not collateral. The school was attacked twice at the beginning of the war, before Iran started retaliating. This was a target that they had months, if not years, to prepare. It was tomahawks, and it was a U.S. attack. The UN has condemned it, and Human Rights Watch has said that this should be investigated as a war crime. So, this is already established. As far as diplomacy, I agree with Alexandre. We haven't seen any form of rioting or uprising or regime change, which I think is natural. When your homeland is being attacked, there is a lot of opposition and discontent in Iran against the status quo, political, economic, social grievances. And we see protests after protests, but not when you're bombing people's homes, not when you're bombing people's cities, not when hospitals and schools and others have been either targeted or have been destroyed, universities. So that formula didn't work. It was pushed out by the Israelis last year during the June war. It didn't work. And it was pushed out this year. Again, it didn't work. So I think diplomacy is really the only way out. It's the best way to take an off-ramp, exit this war, which has been unnecessary, unlawful, and it's just really hurting the entire region and the world.
Thank you very much, Negar Mortazavi, Matthew Kroenig, and Alexandre Vautravers. If you missed any of today's programme, don't worry, you can see it again on our website, aljazeera.com. Your views are welcome too. Go to our Facebook page, that's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or make your point on X. Tag us, we are at AJ Inside Story. I'll be back here very soon. For now, that's it from me, James Bays, and all the team. Stay tuned for Al Jazeera's continuing comprehensive coverage.